shortly after midnight on May 14th, 2008, Brandon Swanson of Marshall, Minnesota, drove his car into a ditch. He was on his way home from celebrating the end of spring semester with fellow students from the Minnesota West Community and Technical College. Uninjured, he got out and called his parents on his cell phone. Unsure of his exact location, he told them he believed he was near Linden, and they drove out to pick him up. However, they were unable to locate him or his vehicle. Swanson remained on the phone with his parents for the next 47 minutes until he went silent and exclaimed, "Oh shit!" He has not been seen or heard of since. This is the story, the disappearance of Brandon Swanson. Brandon Swanson has not been seen or heard of going on 17 years. He drove his car into a ditch on May 14th, 2008. He couldn't get his car out. He stayed in his car talking with his father and mother, telling them about the situation. They told him to just wait in the car and they're going to drive to find him. But he decided to get out of the car and go to see where he was at, to try and figure out where he was at. He thought to himself that he was near Linden. In the morning, Brandon's parents reported him missing to police, who advised them to wait, as such behavior was not uncommon for young men his age. Later that day, the circumstances of his disappearance became more complicated when his cell phone records showed he had been near Porter, 25 miles from where Swanson had said he was in a different direction. That information led to the discovery of his car near Taunton. It is not known whether Swanson was aware of this discrepancy when he talked to his parents. Foul play has not been ruled out, but it has also been proposed that he might have accidentally fallen into the Yellow Medicine River near where his car was found and drowned. Although extensive searches have not found a body, land searches with dogs have continued in the area for several years. His parents successfully lobbied the state legislature to pass Brandon's law, which requires that police begin investigations of missing adults promptly. So, let's get into the background of who Brandon Swanson was. Brandon Swanson was a native of Marshall, Lynn County in southwestern Minnesota. Swanson graduated from Marshall High School in 2007. He then chose to study wind turbines for a year at the Minnesota West Community and Technical College campus in Canopy. Classes at Minnesota West ended for the academic year on May 13th, 2008. Swanson stayed in Canopy for the evening to celebrate with friends at two different parties. He was witnessed drinking alcohol, but his friends said not enough to make him seem visibly intoxicated. The disappearance. Swanson left Canopy for the 30-mile drive home before midnight. Just before 2 a.m., he called his parents on his cell phone, telling them he had driven his Chevrolet Lumina off the road and into a ditch from which he could not remove the car. He was not hurt and asked them to come to where he was and pick him up. Annette and Brandon Swanson got in their pickup truck and drove out to where they thought he was, keeping him on the telephone despite occasional hiccups and drops. Brandon stayed with his car and tried to signal them, flashing his lights on and off, but they saw nothing, nor did he see them do the same. Brandon finally gave up and told them he was leaving the car to walk towards lights he could see that led him to believe he was near Lind, a small town roughly 7 miles southwest of Marshall. He told his father to head for the parking lot of a local bar and wait for him there. Brian began driving there, talking to his son as he did. Shortly after 2:30 a.m., 47 minutes into the call, Brandon suddenly interrupted himself on the phone and said, "Oh shit." He was silent for the remainder of the call until his parents hung up and made multiple attempts to call him back. Brandon has not been seen or heard from since. Now let's get on to the investigation. At 6:30 a.m., his parents reported Brandon missing to the Lynn police. They were told at first that it was hardly unusual for young men that age to stay out all night after the last day of college classes. Annette Swanson specifically recalled that one of the officers said it was Brandon's right to be missing. Later that morning, the Lynn police did start a search, but found no trace of Brandon in the town or outside. They requested that the office of Lynn County Sheriff Joel Dell assist them. To better focus the search, the sheriff's office obtained Brandon's cell phone records, which revealed that Brandon had been calling from the vicinity of Taunton along State Highway 68, the main route to Canopy, northwest of Marshall, 25 miles from Lynn. Searching in that area, deputies discovered Brandon's abandoned car in a ditch of a gravel road along the Lincoln County line, a mile north of Highway 68, bringing the office of that county Sheriff Jack Vizecki into the investigation as well. This is crazy. He told the media that the Lumina had gotten hung up on the top of an incline at the edge of the road, not seriously enough to damage the car, but enough to keep the wheels from touching the ground on that side. There was nothing else fine amidst the car, and due to the grass and gravel in the area surrounding it, there were no tracks. There was no way to tell the direction Brandon might have started walking. His telephone call had been routed through a tower at the intersection of county routes 3 and 10 near Minnesota, another town along Highway 68. By May 15, the call had been determined to have come within 5 miles of the tower. Searchers were concentrating their efforts there, since part of that circle included Yellow, Madison County to the north. Authorities from that jurisdiction also took part. Dial noted that from that area, a red light atop a Taunton Grand elevator could be seen. He thought that it was possible that that red light Brandon had seen had led him to believe Lynn was within walking distance. Ground searches were being complemented with a flyover by an aerial team. Search dogs were also brought in from the Twin Cities, a team of bloodhounds from nearby Codrington County, South Dakota, picked up a 3-mile scent trail that largely followed the fields, roads northwest to an abandoned farm, then along the Yellow Medicine River to a point where it appeared to enter the stream. Brandon had missing fences, and hearing nearby water, his father recalled on the theory that Brandon might have drowned. Boats from the state's Department of Natural Resources were deployed along the river, and gates were installed in some areas in Lincoln County. The water had been 10 feet deep on the morning of his disappearance, but had gone down since then. Deputies also walked the river's banks, and horses and all-terrain vehicles were deployed in the surrounding area. However, DIHOD rolled out a more organized, extensive ground searches. Later searches, after the original search found no sign of Swanson, most efforts were discontinued. Sheriff Vizecki continued to walk the 2 miles of the yellow medicine in that area every day for 30 days. The Swansons' family left their porch light on all night, every night, as a symbol of their hope that Brandon would eventually return or be found, and they still do to this day. That's so sad. Searches resumed late that fall, and after fields planted shortly after the disappearance had been harvested, dogs on those searches continued to follow scents of human remains into a northwest of Portland. They had been searched earlier. Efforts picked up again in the spring after snow melted, but before planting, a cycle that continued through 2011. By that time, 122 square miles had been searched. In 2020, the Minnesota Borough Community Apprehensive took over as lead agency on the case. It set up a tip line by 2015. 90 leads had been reported that way. By that point, when official searches resumed, the area interest had moved towards Mud Creek, a tributary of the Yellow Medicine north and northwest of Portal. So these are the theories of what people think happened to Brandon Swanson. While the trail followed by one of the dogs went to the Yellow Medicine, and despite her son's last known words, Annette Swanson does not think he drowned there. After following the scent to the river, that dog continued up across the other side and along that riverbank to another gravel road, where it continued north towards the Yellow Medicine County line and ended. There really is nothing to indicate that he's in the river, she told CNN. Brian Swanson also recalls that any alcohol his son had consumed earlier in the evening. Notwithstanding, he did not seem disoriented or confused during their phone conversations. If Swanson is still alive, there are other possibilities, although they appear remote. He could have intentionally disappeared, but his parents do not believe he would have done that. Vizecki said he could not rule out foul play, even though there was no evidence of it. In the shadows, someone could have been in the shadows and they could have gotten him that way. And the last piece of this is Brandon's law. They made a law. After the searches, Annette Swanson was still struck by the initial response of the Lynn police that her son had a right to be missing. When she told them how old he was, I'm his mother and I knew something was horribly wrong, she recalled later. She and Brian began lobbying for changes in the state law that will require an investigation into the case of a missing adult to begin as soon as it is reported, much as was already required in cases possibly for abducted children. Annette met with Marty Seifert, minority leader of the State House of Representatives at the time, whose district included Marshall, in a local restaurant. The two talked about the problems she had experienced with police when she reported her son missing. She knew it wouldn't help in her son's case, but that it could help others in the future. Sheriff recalled in 2015. Sheriff introduced a bill called Brandon's Law that would make the required change by amending the law governing the state's existing missing child's program to change the word child to person. He recalled considerably resistance at first from the state's law enforcement community as it was developed in commitment. Part of it had The change also required the police, in addition to determining their preliminary investigation that the reported person is indeed missing, determined whether that person is potentially in dangerous circumstances. They must also notify other nearby law enforcement agencies promptly. Brandon's law also clarifies that the agency taking the report is the lead agency investigating the case. The absence of the distinction had created some problems in the later phases of the initial search. Then 3 different counties were involved. Police were no longer allowed to refuse a report based on an initial belief that no criminal activity was involved, and in the interval since the person was last seen, the possibility that the person may have intentionally disappeared, or the lack of a relationship between the missing person and the reporter. Following the governor's signature, the law took effect at the beginning of July 2009. 4 other states have passed similar laws. Suffer left the legislature in 2010, but he still has the pen used to sign the bill into law. I consider it one of the most important bills I authored in my 14 years. It will save lives. So the question is, what happened to Brandon Swanson? On the early hours of May 14th, 2008, when he drove his car into a ditch. He couldn't get out. He couldn't get the car out. He was waiting in the car, calling. He could talk to his parents. He decided to get out of the car and go looking around to see where he was. He thought he was in a place called Linden, like a town nearby. He was talking with his parents for about 47 minutes, and then the last thing his parents heard, the last thing his father heard his son Brandon say was, "Oh shit," and then it went silent. Brandon never picked up or spoke again. They started looking for him. They looked in the river. They looked in nearby towns. They used dogs, aerial views. They searched the rivers. They could not find him. So the question is, what happened to him? What happened to Brandon Swanson? Why did he just disappear? There are theories where people feel like maybe he did it intentionally. Maybe he intentionally did this because he was planning on disappearing. I've even seen some people suggest that maybe he was abducted by aliens. As crazy as that sounds, like, yeah, maybe Brandon was abducted by aliens. That's why he said, "Oh shit." Some people believe that he drowned in the Medicine River because he was telling his parents that he heard leaking like water, and he saw fences, so they believe maybe he must have like fallen and drowned. But they haven't found a body in the river, and they searched. So other people think maybe he was killed by someone in the town. Like, they say that the farmers in the town didn't let police like search or do research, like to search their property. So they think maybe he was killed, and then, or maybe he was unalived, Brandon, and then they like hid his body somewhere. But these are all just theories. No one truly knows what happened to Brandon Swanson. No one. All they know is that his last words were, "Oh shit," and he disappeared. So like, what happened to him? That is the question. It's been 17 years and no one has found out what has happened to him. Hopefully one day they find out, just to give like his family closure. Can you imagine your son disappearing for 17 years? You don't know where he is. You don't know what happened. At least if they found his body, they would have some closure. Like, okay, at least we know what happened. So that is like the question of the century. What happened to Brandon Swanson? Let me know in the comment section below this video what you guys think happened to Brandon Swanson. And thanks for watching. This was like an experiment video. I find these type of stories interesting, of like these disappearing cases of people who just vanish. I find them very fascinating, and I thought it would be cool to make a video about it. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Good night.